My name is Cassandra Miller, 29 years old, and I never expected my cousin's lavish Boston wedding to be the place where everything changed. I was fixing my bridesmaid dress in the hallway when I overheard my father's voice. "She's just a security guard," he told his colleagues with that familiar, disappointed tone. The words stung like they always did, but he had no idea what would happen in the next 24 hours. Or that his just a security guard daughter would end up all over the news. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know if your family has ever completely misjudged who you really are. Growing up in the Miller household meant living with sky-high expectations. Our colonial-style home in Wellesley, Massachusetts, housed a family of overachievers led by my father, Thomas Miller, a corporate attorney whose client list included half the Fortune 500 companies in Boston. My mother, Amanda, was equally impressive as one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons at Massachusetts General Hospital. Their wedding photos showed two people who looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Both brilliant, beautiful, and from families where excellence wasn't just encouraged, it was the baseline. My older brother James took after my father in every way possible. From his analytical mind to his impeccable fashion sense, he was the perfect heir to the Miller legal legacy. By the time I was in high school, James was already at Harvard Law, following directly in our father's footsteps. When family friends would visit, my parents would parade James's accomplishments like prize trophies, his LSAT scores, his internship at the state attorney's office, the law review articles he'd published. The pride in my father's voice was unmistakable. Then there was my younger sister, Catherine, Katie to the family, who was my mother's medical protege. Even in high school, she could recite complex anatomical terms and would spend weekends shadowing our mother at the hospital. She had our mother's delicate hands and steady nerves, perfect for the surgical career that everyone knew was her destiny. While other teenagers were at the mall, Katie was taking advanced biology courses and volunteering in medical clinics. And then there was me, Cassandra, Cassie to everyone except my father, who insisted on using my full name. I wasn't unambitious or unintelligent. I consistently made the honor roll and captained the track team. But my interests diverged from the Miller family tradition of medicine and law. In my sophomore year of high school, we had a career day where a former FBI agent spoke about security work. Something clicked inside me that day: the systematic approach to protection, the psychological aspects of threat assessment, the balance of physical and mental skills required. When I shared my newfound interest at dinner that night, my father chuckled as if I'd told a joke. "Security is what people do when they can't get into law school, Cassandra," he said, passing the potatoes without looking up. My mother at least tried to be supportive in her own way. "Honey, with your grades, you could do so much more. Maybe forensic psychology if you're interested in that sort of thing." But I was stubborn, another Miller family trait. Throughout high school, I focused on developing skills that no one else in my family valued. While James memorized legal precedents and Katie studied cellular biology, I took self-defense classes, studied surveillance techniques, and read everything I could about threat assessment and security protocols. I joined the school's ROTC program, which my parents tolerated only because it looked good on college applications. My physical abilities developed alongside my analytical skills. I could run 5 miles without breaking a sweat, bench press more than most guys on the football team, and had reflexes that my coaches called uncanny. But these weren't achievements that earned space on the Miller family brag wall, where diplomas and academic awards were displayed like masterpieces in a museum. The real breaking point came during my senior year when college decisions had to be made. The family expectation was clear. I would apply to Ivy League schools and pursue either pre-law or pre-med. I applied to those schools to appease my parents, but also to several universities with strong criminal justice programs. When my acceptance letter from Northeastern University arrived with a partial scholarship to their criminal justice program, I was ecstatic. My parents were not. Criminal justice? My father's voice filled our kitchen, making the crystal glasses in the cabinet vibrate slightly. That's a degree for people who want to be police officers, Cassandra. What's wrong with that? I challenged, feeling my face flush. We didn't put you through private school your entire life so you could walk a beat in a dangerous neighborhood, my mother interjected, her surgical precision evident even in how she cut me down. This isn't about being a police officer, I tried explaining. There are corporate security positions, private security firms, government agencies. Blue-collar work, my father interrupted. The Millers aren't blue-collar people. That conversation marked the first major fracture in my relationship with my parents. Despite their disapproval, I accepted Northeastern's offer. James tried to mediate, suggesting I could always transfer to pre-law after a year, while Katie remained Switzerland neutral, unwilling to risk her golden child status. The day I moved into my college dorm, my father helped carry my boxes with rigid politeness. As he was leaving, he handed me a credit card connected to the family account. Your mother and I still expect excellence, Cassandra, he said formally. Just because we disagree with your choices doesn't mean we won't support you financially. You're still a Miller. I recognized it for what it was, not just financial support, but a lingering tether, a reminder that despite my rebellion, I was still expected to uphold the family name somehow. What he didn't realize was that I absolutely intended to uphold the Miller standard of excellence, just not in a field he respected. Throughout my college years, the emotional distance between my parents and me grew into a chasm. Holiday dinners became exercises in polite conversation about everything except my studies or future plans. When relatives asked about me, my father would quickly change the subject to James's clerkship with a federal judge or Katie's early acceptance to medical school. I became the family footnote, the asterisk in the otherwise perfect Miller narrative. But with each security course I aced, each training certification I earned, and each professor who recognized my natural aptitude for the field, I became more certain I'd chosen the right path. Even if it was one my family couldn't understand or appreciate. By graduation day, when I received my bachelor's degree in criminal justice with a specialization in security studies, the gap had calcified into something seemingly permanent. My parents attended the ceremony and took the obligatory photos, but the pride that had been so evident at James's and Katie's graduations was noticeably absent. In its place was a resigned acceptance that their middle child had chosen a path they considered beneath her potential and beneath the Miller name. Little did they know that I was just getting started. My first job after college wasn't exactly glamorous, and it played right into my father's preconceived notions. I became a security guard at the Prudential Center Mall in downtown Boston, patrolling retail floors in a polyester uniform that felt like a Halloween costume of what my parents feared I'd become. The starting salary was barely enough to afford my tiny studio apartment in Allston, and I had to fight against my pride to keep using the family credit card for groceries and essentials. The first time my parents visited my apartment, my mother looked around with thinly veiled horror at the efficiency kitchen and futon that doubled as my bed. My father noticed the security uniform hanging on my closet door and pressed his lips together in that way that always preceded disappointment. You know, Cassandra, he said carefully, James could help you get a paralegal position at his firm. The starting salary is twice what you're making, and it could lead to law school if you applied yourself. I'm applying myself right now, Dad, I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Just not in the direction you want. He sighed, looking tired. Security guard. It's just hard to tell our friends that our daughter, who graduated with honors, is watching mall shoppers for shoplifting. What my father didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that the mall position was merely a starting point. Security, like medicine or law, has hierarchies and specializations. You don't begin as a neurosurgeon or a senior partner, you work your way up. My breakthrough came 3 months into my mall job when I noticed a pattern of high-end merchandise disappearing from stores during specific shift changes. Instead of just reporting it, I compiled data, established a timeline, and identified a suspect. One of the janitorial staff who had access to service corridors. When I presented my findings to the head of security, he was impressed enough to introduce me to someone who would change my career trajectory. Sergeant Frank Reynolds was a retired police detective who now ran security for several financial institutions in Boston. Square-jawed with salt and pepper hair and hands that looked like they could bend steel, he had the calm confidence that comes from decades of experience. After reviewing my work on the mall theft case, he offered me a position on his team at Commonwealth Trust Bank. "You've got good instincts, kid," he told me in his gravelly Boston accent. "Most of these young guards are just collecting a paycheck, but you've got the eye. I can teach skills, but I can't teach that." Under Frank's mentorship, I flourished. I learned advanced surveillance techniques, threat assessment protocols, and the psychological aspects of security that had fascinated me since high school. Frank became the professional father figure my own father had refused to be, praising my aptitude while pushing me to improve. "You're not just a security guard," he'd tell me. "You're a security professional. There's a difference." I soaked up everything Frank taught me, earning certifications in advanced threat assessment, emergency response, and executive protection. When Frank recommended me for specialized training with former military and law enforcement personnel, I took unpaid leave to attend, living on ramen noodles for weeks to afford it. My family remained largely uninterested in these developments. At Thanksgiving dinner, while James discussed his first major case win and Katie detailed a complicated surgical procedure she'd assisted with, I tried to share my experience providing security for a visiting foreign dignitary at the bank. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, clearly not listening. "James, tell us more about that class action suit." I stopped sharing my professional life with them after that. If they weren't interested in my successes, they didn't deserve to know about them. 2 years into my bank security position, I had built a reputation among Boston's private security community as someone with exceptional observational skills and quick thinking. When an incident occurred, an attempted robbery that I thwarted by noticing behavioral indicators before the perpetrator even drew his weapon, it caught the attention of people beyond my immediate circle. An email arrived from Griffin Elite Security, a firm so prestigious in security circles that it was essentially the equivalent of a white-shoe law firm in my father's world. They specialized in high-level executive protection, cybersecurity integration, and threat assessment for corporations and individuals with assets worth protecting. Their client list was confidential, but rumor had it they protected tech billionaires, visiting royalty, and diplomats during sensitive negotiations. The recruitment process was grueling: physical tests, psychological evaluations, scenario simulations, and technical assessments that pushed me to my limits. When the offer finally came, the salary was nearly triple what I was making at the bank, with benefits that included international travel, specialized training, and the opportunity to work with the best security professionals in the business. I accepted immediately but made a decision that would ultimately lead to the wedding incident. I told my family nothing about the prestigious nature of my new position. When they asked about my job change, I simply said I'd moved to another security company. My father assumed lateral movement, perhaps from one shopping mall to another, and I didn't correct him. This created the double life I maintained for the next 3 years. To my family, I remained just a security guard with a blue-collar job beneath their professional standards. But in reality, I became a senior security consultant specializing in risk assessment and personal protection for high-profile clients. I traveled to Dubai with tech executives, secured meetings between corporate leaders in Singapore, and developed security protocols for events hosting some of the most influential people in the world. My colleagues at Griffin Elite became my second family, people who respected my abilities and valued my contributions. Adrian Parker, the firm's operations director, became a close friend and mentor. A former Secret Service agent with short silver hair and impeccable pantsuits, she recognized potential in me that even Frank had missed. "You have a unique ability to blend in," she told me once after I'd successfully managed security for a sensitive corporate merger meeting. "Most security people stand out, they want to be seen as protection. But you can disappear into a crowd while seeing everything. That's rare and valuable." Under Adrienne's guidance, I developed a specialty in covert protection, security that doesn't look like security. I could attend black tie events as a guest, monitor a situation while appearing to be merely enjoying champagne, and step in only when necessary. This skill would prove particularly valuable at my cousin's wedding, though I had no way of knowing that then. As my professional reputation grew, so did the gap between my actual career and my family's perception of it. At Christmas gatherings and birthday dinners, I'd listen to James discuss his partnership track and Katie's residency stories while keeping silent about protecting a famous actress from a stalker or developing security for a controversial political conference. "And what about you, Cassandra?" my father would eventually ask, obligation rather than interest driving the question. "Still with that security company?" "Yes," I'd answer simply. "Still with Griffin Elite." The name meant nothing to him. If he'd ever Googled the company, he would have discovered its prestigious reputation, but he never bothered. In his mind, I remained the family disappointment who watched store monitors and escorted shoplifters to mall exits. Sometimes I wondered why I maintained the charade. Part of it was pride. I wanted them to value my work without the external validation of a prestigious company name. Part was resentment. After years of dismissing my career choice, why should they get to suddenly approve when they realized its actual status? And part was self-protection. Their disapproval had stopped hurting once I stopped expecting their approval. I might have continued this parallel existence indefinitely if not for my cousin Natalie's wedding and the chain of events it set in motion. The Fairmont Copley Plaza in Boston is the kind of hotel where the doormen wear top hats and white gloves, where crystal chandeliers reflect off marble floors, and where Boston's elite have celebrated special occasions for generations. It was exactly the kind of venue my Aunt Diane would choose for her only daughter's wedding, a place that screamed old money and social standing, perfect for the union of two prominent Boston families. My cousin Natalie had always been kind to me, even after the family narrative of poor Cassie and her security guard job had taken hold. When her embossed wedding invitation arrived requesting my presence for the entire weekend of festivities, I suspected she'd included me in the bridal party more from family obligation than genuine closeness. Nevertheless, I took a rare weekend off from Griffin Elite and packed my bridesmaid dress. A surprisingly tasteful emerald green silk that complemented my dark hair and pale skin. I arrived Friday afternoon for the rehearsal dinner, checking into my hotel room with a professional's eye, noting exits, security camera placements, and staff patterns automatically. It was a habit I couldn't switch off anymore, much like how my father probably assessed every social gathering for networking potential, or my mother likely noticed the vascular health of people's hands when shaking them. The first family encounter happened in the hotel lobby as I wheeled my suitcase toward the elevators. My mother spotted me first, waving with the controlled enthusiasm she reserved for public settings. "Cassandra, darling." She air-kissed near both my cheeks, careful not to smudge her perfect makeup. At 58, she remained striking, her blonde hair professionally colored to hide any gray, her surgeon's posture impeccable. "We just arrived ourselves. Your father's checking in." My father approached, handing a bellhop his premium luggage. He'd added more gray at his temples since I'd last seen him at Easter, but his tailored suit and confident stride projected the same authority he'd always carried. "Cassandra," he nodded, squeezing my shoulder briefly, his version of a warm greeting. "Good to see you made it. James and Sophia are arriving later. Their nanny was running late. And Katie's coming straight from her shift at the hospital." Of course, he'd immediately update me on my siblings. James now had a perfect wife and 2 perfect children to add to his perfect legal career. Katie was thriving in her surgical residency. The Miller success stories needed to be established right away. "How's work?" my mother asked with the polite disinterest of someone asking about the weather. "Busy," I replied simply. "We've had some interesting projects recently." "Still with that security company?" my father asked, checking his watch. "What was it called again?" "Griffin Elite," I answered, knowing the name meant nothing to him. "Well," he said with forced brightness, "at least it's steady employment in this economy." The condescension stung, but I'd grown accustomed to it. Before I could respond, my Aunt Diane swept into the lobby, clipboard in hand and wedding coordinator trailing behind her. "Thomas." "Amanda," she called, then noticed me. And Cassie. Wonderful, you're here. Natalie will be so pleased. We're gathering in the Renaissance room at 5 for the rehearsal. The afternoon continued in a blur of wedding preparations, family arrivals, and the careful social choreography that accompanies such events. Throughout it all, I maintained my role as dutiful bridesmaid while fielding the usual questions from relatives I rarely saw. Security? Still doing that? How interesting. Have you thought about going back to school for something else? Is there advancement in that field, dear? Each question carried the subtext, when will you get a real career like the rest of the Millers? The rehearsal dinner was held in a private dining room at the hotel's restaurant. Crystal clinked against fine china as waiters poured expensive wine and served delicate portions of perfectly prepared food. I was seated at a table with other bridesmaids and groomsmen, thankfully away from my immediate family, though close enough to observe them. My father was in his element, surrounded by other successful professionals. From my position, I could see him gesturing animatedly as he spoke to a small group of men in expensive suits, colleagues or friends of the groom's family, perhaps. I wouldn't have paid attention except that I heard him mention my name. My daughter Cassandra? Yes, she's here, one of the bridesmaids, he was saying to a distinguished older man with a bow tie. James is our attorney. He's with Robertson and Schmidt now. And Catherine is finishing her surgical residency at Mass General. And your other daughter? The man prompted. What does she do? There was a microsecond of hesitation before my father replied with a dismissive wave of his hand. She's just a security guard. You know how it is, not everyone can follow the family tradition. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not the fact that he described my job incorrectly, I was used to that. But the just before it, and the apologetic tone, as if my career choice was something that required an explanation or excuse. I set down my fork, appetite gone. Across the room, my mother caught my eye, and something in my expression must have told her I'd overheard. She at least had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable before turning back to her conversation. After dinner, while guests mingled with drinks, I stepped out onto the terrace for air. I was surprised when my father joined me a few minutes later, scotch in hand. Beautiful venue, he commented, looking out at the Boston skyline. Diane has outdone herself. It's lovely, I agreed stiffly. A moment of silence stretched between us before I decided to address what I'd heard. I'm not just anything, Dad, I said quietly. He turned, his expression confused before understanding dawned. You heard that? I didn't mean anything by it, Cassandra. You've been dismissing my career for years, I continued, keeping my voice level. Would it kill you to show a fraction of the pride you have for James and Katie? My father sighed, swirling his scotch. It's not about pride. We just had different expectations for you. You're smart, capable. You could have been anything. I am something, I countered. Just because it's not what you wanted doesn't make it worthless. I never said worthless, he defended. Security is necessary work. Someone has to do it. And that someone is me. By choice. Because I'm good at it. He nodded absently, clearly not really hearing me. Of course you are. You're a Miller. You'd be good at whatever you applied yourself to. I just wish you'd applied yourself to something more substantial. The conversation was going nowhere, as it always did. My father couldn't see past his narrow definition of success, and I was tired of trying to make him understand. I need to get back inside, I said finally. Natalie will be looking for the bridesmaids. As I turned to leave, my father called after me, We just want what's best for you, Cassandra. I paused, but didn't turn around. No, Dad. You want what looks best to other people. I rejoined the party, plastering on a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Tomorrow was Natalie's big day, and despite my hurt feelings, I wouldn't let family tension ruin her wedding. What I didn't realize was that the wedding would end up being eventful in ways none of us could have anticipated. Wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect early autumn day that makes Boston magical, crisp air, golden sunshine, and the public garden across from the hotel ablaze with fall colors. As a bridesmaid, my morning was scheduled down to the minute. Hair appointment at 8 o'clock, makeup at 9:30, mimosas and light brunch with the bridal party at 10:45, photos at noon, ceremony at 2 o'clock. By 11:30, with my hair swept into an elegant updo and my makeup professionally applied, I had a rare moment of downtime while Natalie had her final dress fitting. Rather than remain in the bridal suite with the other chattering bridesmaids, I decided to take a quick walk through the hotel lobby to clear my head after the previous night's tense exchange with my father. The Fairmont was buzzing with activity, not just for Natalie's wedding, but for what appeared to be at least 2 other events. Hotel security was visible but discreet, with earpieces and subtle uniforms that blended with the luxury surroundings. Normally, I would have appreciated their professionalism, but something in the lobby caught my trained eye. A man in a hotel uniform was wheeling a cart of champagne across the marble floor, standard for a busy wedding day. But his collar was wrong, slightly askew in a way that suggested the uniform was new or borrowed. His shoes, partially visible beneath his pants, were high-end Italian leather, not the practical footwear of someone on their feet all day. Most tellingly, he kept touching his ear as if listening to something, but he wore no visible earpiece like the actual hotel staff. I slowed my pace, casually taking a seat in a lobby armchair that offered a good vantage point. Over the next 10 minutes, I observed the man make 3 trips through the lobby, each time with different service equipment, each time scanning the room in a pattern that wasn't casual, but methodical. When he disappeared down a service corridor, I noticed another man, this one in a guest suit rather than a uniform, following the same skin pattern from near the reception desk. My professional instincts hummed with warning. This wasn't random, it was surveillance. Someone was casing the hotel, likely targeting one of the wealthy events taking place. I debated my options: alert hotel security with what was, admittedly, just a professional hunch, call Griffin Elite for a consult, or handle it myself. The decision was made for me when I spotted a third person, a woman in a housekeeping uniform with the same incongruent details, exchange a nearly imperceptible nod with the suited man. I recognized the team dynamic immediately. This was a coordinated operation. I pulled out my phone and texted Adrian at Griffin, at Fairmont Copley for family wedding. Observing potential team of 3+ conducting pre-operational surveillance. Professional quality. Worth running names through database. Her response came quickly. Send pics if possible. We'll check known individuals targeting high-end events in Boston area. Using my phone's camera, I discreetly took photos of the 3 suspects, making it appear as though I was checking social media or taking selfies. I sent them to Adrian and returned to the bridal suite, my mind now split between bridesmaid duties and security concerns. 20 minutes later, as I was helping Natalie with her veil, my phone buzzed. Adrian's message made my stomach drop. Confirmed. Thomas Ward's crew. High-end jewelry thieves. Hit 3 society weddings in NYC last month. Stealing family heirlooms, wedding gifts. Very sophisticated. Local police notified, but evidence insufficient for immediate response. Can you maintain surveillance until we get someone there? ETA 45 minutes. I glanced at Natalie, radiant in her designer gown, pearls that had belonged to her grandmother adorning her neck. Around the room, other bridesmaids were putting on family jewelry pieces, diamonds, sapphires, heirlooms worth tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The wedding gifts displayed in an adjacent room included antique silver, crystal, and other valuables. Will do, I texted back. Ceremony starts in 2 hours. We'll delay if necessary. Do not engage, Adrian warned. These people are professionals. Ward himself has assault charges. Under normal circumstances, I would have followed that directive. But these weren't normal circumstances. This was my family's event being targeted, and waiting 45 minutes might be too late. I excused myself again, claiming I needed to check on the flower arrangements. Once in the hallway, I kicked off my heels and moved quickly to the service elevator, using my room key card to override the staff-only restriction, a trick Frank had taught me years ago that worked on most hotel systems. In the back corridors of the hotel, I moved efficiently, checking storage rooms and service areas. In a linen closet on the ballroom level, I found what I was looking for. Evidence of their preparation. A hotel luggage cart had been modified with hidden compartments, perfect for quickly loading and removing valuable items during the chaos of a wedding reception. As I was examining it, I heard footsteps approaching. I slipped behind a rack of tablecloths just as the door opened and the false waiter entered, now accompanied by a fourth person I hadn't seen before. A tall, lean man with a thin scar along his jawline who moved with the confident ease of someone in charge. Thomas Ward himself, I realized. The notorious jewel thief whose crew had stolen millions in valuables from society events across the country. Timelines moved up, Ward was saying quietly. Security change at 3:30 instead of 4 o'clock. We go during the ceremony, not the reception. Less witnesses, more time with the gifts before they're missed. What about the family jewels? The fake waiter asked. The bride's wearing the target pieces. Amy will handle it, Ward replied. Bridesmaid emergency. Spilled drink, torn dress. Something to get her alone. She knows what to do. They were planning to target Natalie directly. My cousin on her wedding day. They left and I waited 30 seconds before slipping out of the closet. I had less than an hour before they would make their move. Not enough time for Griffin backup to arrive. I texted Adrian again with the updated information and made a decision. I wouldn't let them ruin Natalie's wedding. I wouldn't let them steal family heirlooms and gifts. And I wouldn't wait for backup. Returning to the bridal suite, I pulled aside Natalie's mother, my Aunt Diane. There's a security situation, I said quietly. Nothing to panic about, but I need you to move all the wedding gifts to a secure location immediately. Say there's been a change of plans for the display. Aunt Diane blinked in confusion. What are you talking about, Cassie? Please trust me, I insisted. I work in high-level security. There are professional thieves targeting the wedding. They're planning to steal the gifts during the ceremony and possibly Natalie's jewelry as well. To her credit, Aunt Diane didn't dismiss me outright. Are you serious? Should we call the police? They've been notified, but they won't arrive in time. I have colleagues coming, but for now, we need to secure the valuables without causing panic. Perhaps it was my tone or the confidence with which I spoke, but Aunt Diane nodded. What do you need me to do? Have the gifts moved to the hotel vault immediately. Tell the bridesmaids to leave any valuable jewelry in the hotel safe, not in the suite. And don't let Natalie be alone with any hotel staff we haven't personally verified. As Aunt Diane went to handle the gifts, I made another quick call to a Griffin Elite colleague who lived in Boston, explaining the situation. He promised to be there in 20 minutes, still cutting it close, but better than nothing. I returned to my bridesmaid duties, helping Natalie with last-minute preparations while keeping a vigilant eye on everyone entering the suite. When a housekeeping staff member, the woman I'd identified earlier, knocked with fresh towels, I intercepted her at the door. We're all set, thank you, I said pleasantly but firmly, blocking her view of Natalie. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, professional recognition passing between us. She knew I'd made her. She nodded and withdrew, but not before I noticed her hand move subtly toward her waistband, possibly reaching for a weapon. The ceremony time approached. As we lined up to process into the ballroom, I positioned myself to keep Natalie in sight at all times. My Griffin colleague texted that he had arrived and was monitoring the hallways and gift area. The wedding proceeded beautifully. Natalie looked radiant walking down the aisle to her groom, the string quartet played Pachelbel perfectly, and the afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor. I should have been focused on the romantic moment, but my attention was split, scanning constantly for Ward's crew. I spotted the fake waiter positioned near a service entrance, speaking into what appeared to be a hotel radio but was likely communication with his team. The woman who had tried to enter our suite was now dressed as a photographer's assistant, moving around the edges of the room. Ward himself was nowhere to be seen, which concerned me most of all. As the minister began the vows, I noticed a subtle shift in the fake waiter's posture, a preparation to move. Without drawing attention, I slipped from my bridesmaid position and moved toward the side of the room, as if headed to the restroom. I was halfway there when I saw it, Ward himself emerging from behind a decorative screen, moving purposefully toward the now empty bridal suite where the bridesmaids' purses and personal items remained. Despite the gifts being secured, there were still valuables to be taken. I followed, maintaining distance, watching as he used some kind of electronic device to override the key card lock. As he slipped inside, I texted my colleague his location and approached the door. What happened next occurred in a matter of seconds. I entered to find Ward rifling through the bridesmaids' belongings, a small bag already filled with jewelry and electronics. "Hotel security," I said calmly. "I'm going to need you to put those down." Ward turned, surprise quickly replaced by cold calculation on his face. "No, you're not security," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You're with the wedding. The bridesmaid who's been watching us." He moved toward me, reaching again to his waistband. I didn't wait to see if he was armed. Years of training took over. As he lunged, I sidestepped, using his momentum against him. A quick strike to his solar plexus doubled him over, and I followed with a precise hit to the nerve bundle in his shoulder. Ward dropped to his knees, and I had him in a joint lock before he could recover, using a bridesmaid's curling iron cord to secure his wrists. The door burst open, and my Griffin colleague entered, followed by 2 actual hotel security guards who had finally been alerted to the situation. "Perfect timing," I said dryly. "His team includes at least 3 others. The waiter by the east entrance, the photographer's assistant, and likely a 4th person we haven't identified." My colleague nodded, already coordinating with hotel security through his earpiece. Within minutes, the entire team had been apprehended and real police were on their way. By the time I returned to the ceremony, the couple was being pronounced husband and wife. No one in the wedding party had noticed my brief absence, and the guests remained blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded. As everyone applauded the newlyweds' first kiss, I caught my Aunt Diane's questioning look from the front row. I gave her a subtle nod and watched relief wash over her face. Crisis averted. Wedding saved. What I didn't realize was that a hotel security camera had captured my takedown of Thomas Ward. Or that by morning, that footage would be playing on every local news station in Boston. I woke the next morning to my phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. Bleary-eyed and still exhausted from the previous day's events, I swiped open my screen to find dozens of missed calls, text messages, and social media alerts. Most puzzling were texts from Griffin Elite colleagues I rarely heard from, all variations of "nice work" and "you're famous." Confused, I opened a link that Adrian had sent with the message, "Cat's out of the bag, Cassie. Might want to prepare your family." The link took me to a Boston news station's website, where the headline made my stomach drop: "Society Wedding Saved by Undercover Security Expert, Notorious Jewel Thief Captured." The accompanying video, clearly taken from the hotel's security feed, showed me in my emerald bridesmaid dress taking down Thomas Ward with professional precision. Though my face was partially obscured from the camera angle, anyone who knew me would recognize me instantly. The article identified me as an undercover operative from Griffin Elite Security, one of the nation's most prestigious private security firms, who happened to be attending the wedding. A quote from Boston Police Department's Lieutenant Rodriguez praised the quick thinking and exceptional training of the security professional who prevented what could have been a theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars in family heirlooms and wedding gifts. I sat up in bed, fully awake now. This wasn't how I'd planned for my family to discover the truth about my career. For years, I'd maintained the fiction of being just a security guard, partly out of resentment, partly from pride. Now that careful deception had been shattered by a viral security video and a slow news day in Boston. As if on cue, my phone rang with my mother's ringtone. I took a deep breath and answered. "Cassandra? Are you watching the news?" Her voice held an unfamiliar tone. Something between confusion and shock. "I just saw it, Mom. Your father and I are in the hotel restaurant. Could you come down and explain what's going on?" The Fairmont's restaurant was buzzing with wedding guests enjoying their post-celebration brunch. As I approached my parents' table, I noticed how my father sat unusually rigid, his newspapers open but unread. My mother was stirring her coffee absently, her usual composed expression replaced by genuine bewilderment. I slid into the empty chair across from them, bracing myself for their reaction. So, my father began, his voice carefully neutral. Griffin Elite Security. Yes, I replied simply. Which is not, as we were led to believe, a mall security position. No, it's not. A waiter approached, but my father waved him away impatiently. The news is calling it one of the nation's most prestigious security firms. They said you're a senior consultant who protects diplomats and executives. There was no point in downplaying it now. That's correct. And you've led us believe for years that you were working some low-level security job because... The hurt in my mother's voice was unexpected. Because you made it abundantly clear that unless I was a doctor or lawyer, my career wasn't worth discussing, I said, keeping my voice level. You dismissed security work as blue-collar and beneath our family, so I stopped trying to make you understand. My father opened his mouth to object, then closed it again, uncharacteristically lost for words. Before he could formulate a response, my cousin Alexis rushed over to our table, phone in hand. Oh my God, Cassie, you're all over social media. Look at this. She thrust her phone toward us, showing a TikTok video of my takedown that had already accumulated hundreds of thousands of views. The caption read, "Bridesmaid by day, badass security expert by night." #wedding ninja, #security queen. The whole family is talking about it. Alexis continued excitedly. Uncle Robert says you saved like $500,000 in jewelry and gifts. Is that true? And do you really protect celebrities and billionaires? That's so cool. My mother looked like she might faint. My father was staring at Alexis's phone, watching the footage replay of his daughter, the disappointment, the security guard, efficiently neutralizing a notorious criminal. Alexis, could you give us a minute? I asked gently. Oh, sure, sorry, she said, bouncing away to undoubtedly spread the news to more relatives. An uncomfortable silence fell over our table. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us the truth about your position? It was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? The one that cut to the heart of our family dynamic. I tried, in the beginning, I said carefully. I tried to explain that security isn't just guards at malls. That there are levels of expertise and specialization, just like in law or medicine. But you weren't interested in hearing it. My mother had the grace to look ashamed. We may have been closed-minded. You introduced me as just a security guard to your colleagues at the rehearsal dinner, I reminded my father. Just yesterday, you were embarrassed by my career. He flinched slightly. I didn't understand what you actually did. You never asked, I replied simply. Not once in the past 5 years have you asked me about my work with any genuine interest. You assumed, and I stopped correcting you. As if the universe had timed it perfectly, a breaking news alert appeared on the restaurant's television. The morning show was now interviewing Lieutenant Rodriguez about the capture of Thomas Ward. We've been trying to catch Ward's crew for months, the officer was saying. The security consultant who apprehended him demonstrated exceptional skill. Griffin Elite is known for hiring only the top professionals in the field, former military special forces, FBI agents, and specialists with unique abilities. They're essentially the Navy SEALs of private security. Every head in the restaurant turned toward the TV, including my parents. I watched their expressions as the magnitude of my actual professional standing began to dawn on them. Is that true? My mother asked quietly. You work with former FBI and military personnel. I train them sometimes, I answered, the admission feeling both vindicating and exhausting. I specialize in covert protection and threat assessment. The clients I can't name would surprise you. My father was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. And your salary? Benefits. Of course, that would be his next question. Comparable to a senior associate at your law firm, Dad. Maybe better, with international assignments. The waiter returned, this time with my brother James and his wife Sophia in tow. James was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen from him before, something approaching respect. Cassie, what the hell, he said, pulling up a chair. Sophia's father called us this morning asking if my ninja sister could consult on security for his company's annual meeting. I thought he was having a stroke or something until we saw the news. For the next hour, as more family members trickled in, I found myself at the center of attention for the first time in my adult life. My aunt and uncle thanked me profusely for saving their daughter's wedding. Cousins peppered me with questions about my work. Even my usually aloof brother seemed genuinely impressed by the footage of my takedown. Throughout it all, my parents remained uncharacteristically quiet, absorbing this new reality where their middle child. The disappointment, the one who had rejected the family path, was suddenly being hailed as something of a hero. As the impromptu family gathering began to disperse, my father finally spoke up again, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Cassandra, we may owe you an apology. It was perhaps the first time I'd ever heard him struggle for words. We made assumptions, my mother added softly. We should have asked more questions. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of how they dismissed my choices for years, but it was a start. The revelation of my actual career had forced them to confront their preconceptions, though I knew one viral video wouldn't instantly heal years of accumulated hurt. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Lieutenant Rodriguez himself appeared, approaching our table with purpose. "Ms. Miller," he asked, extending his hand to me. "I wanted to thank you personally. We've been after Ward for months. Your intervention was textbook perfect." My father watched this exchange, the respect in the officer's voice unmistakable. I saw something shift in his expression, perhaps the beginning of a reevaluation that had been years in the making. "She's a Miller," he said suddenly, his voice carrying that familiar pride I'd heard him use when discussing James's legal victories or Katie's surgical accomplishments. Excellence runs in the family. Our eyes met, and for the first time in years, I felt seen by my father, not as the daughter who had disappointed him, but as a professional who had excelled in her chosen field. It wasn't everything, but it was something. As we left the hotel that day, I knew that the family dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The truth was out, the carefully maintained fiction shattered. What would build in its place remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that my parents might finally understand the path I had chosen. The media frenzy that followed the wedding incident gave my family little opportunity to process the revelations about my career privately. By Monday morning, local Boston stations had pieced together more details. I wasn't just a security consultant, but one of Griffin Elite's top operatives, with specialized training that put me in an elite category even within the prestigious firm. A profile piece in the Boston Globe's business section referred to me as one of the most sought-after security experts on the East Coast and mentioned some of my publicly known assignments, including protection details for international business conferences and consulting work for technology companies concerned about industrial espionage. While I had managed to keep most of my high-profile client work confidential, enough information emerged to paint a picture dramatically different from the mall security guard image my family had maintained for years. I had returned to my apartment Sunday night, hoping for a brief respite from the family drama before returning to work on Tuesday. When my doorbell rang Monday afternoon, I wasn't entirely surprised to find my father standing in the hallway, his usual confident posture slightly diminished. "May I come in?" he asked formally, as if visiting a stranger's home. I stepped aside to let him enter. My apartment, which I'd never invited my parents to visit after they dismissed my first studio as beneath our family standards, was a spacious two-bedroom in one of Boston's more expensive neighborhoods. The furnishings were minimalist but high quality, the artwork original pieces I'd collected during international assignments. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the Charles River. My father took it all in, his expression unreadable. "This is not what I expected." "What did you expect, Dad?" "Thought I'd be living in some security guard dormitory." He winced slightly at the edge in my voice. "I suppose I deserve that." I gestured for him to sit on the leather sofa while I took the armchair opposite. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until he finally spoke. "Your mother wanted to come too, but she had an emergency surgery. She sends her, well, I'm not sure what exactly she sends. We're both still processing." "That makes 3 of us," I replied evenly. My father ran a hand through his silver hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty from a man who prided himself on always knowing exactly what to say. I've been reading about Griffin Elite since yesterday. Their client list, their reputation in the security industry. It's impressive. Yes, it is. Why didn't you tell us? He asked, the question erupting with surprising emotion. All these years, we thought you were working some dead-end security job, barely making ends meet. We worried about you. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. Worried? Is that what you call it? You belittled my career choice at every opportunity. You made it clear you thought I was wasting my potential. You introduced me to your colleagues as just a security guard, with that tone that said everything about how you really felt. We didn't understand because you never tried to understand, I interrupted, years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. Not once did you ask about my training, my responsibilities, my accomplishments. You decided security work was beneath our family, and that was that. My father looked genuinely stunned by my outburst. In our family, emotions were kept carefully controlled, disagreements handled with cold precision rather than raw feeling. You're right, he said finally, the admission clearly difficult for him. We made assumptions based on our own biases. Your biases, I corrected. Your narrow definition of success. He nodded slowly. Perhaps. But you also kept the truth from us deliberately. The Globe article mentioned you've been with Griffin Elite for 4 years. For years of letting us believe something that wasn't true. It was a fair point, and one I had been avoiding confronting within myself. My own pride and resentment had played a role in maintaining the deception. At first, I tried to explain, I said more quietly. But you and Mom made it clear you weren't interested in understanding security work as a legitimate profession. After a while, it became easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe. And yes, part of me wanted to prove I could succeed without your approval or understanding. My father looked out at the river view for a long moment. I always thought James and Catherine followed our path because they saw its value. It never occurred to me that they might have done so because they feared our disapproval. The insight surprised me. It was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from my father. Do you think they would have chosen differently without that pressure? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. They seem happy in their careers. But I wonder now if I gave any of you enough room to find your own paths. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of misunderstanding hanging between us. Your mother and I built our lives around certain principles, he continued eventually. Achievement, status, carrying on family traditions. We thought we were giving our children advantages by guiding them toward paths we understood. There are many paths to a successful life, Dad. Many ways to make meaningful contributions. Clearly, he said, gesturing around my apartment. The Globe article mentioned your starting salary is likely in the 6 figures. I couldn't help but smile. Some things never changed. My father would always see financial success as a primary measure of worth. Is that what matters most to you? That I make good money? He had the grace to look embarrassed. No, of course not. But I won't pretend it doesn't matter at all. What parent doesn't want their child to be financially secure? I've been financially independent since I was 25, Dad. I just never felt the need to prove that to you. Another silence fell between us, less tense than before but still weighted with unspoken thoughts. Your takedown of that thief was impressive, my father said finally. The police officer said your technique was textbook perfect. I've had excellent training. Clearly. He hesitated before adding, I'm proud of what you did at the wedding. Protecting the family that way. The words I'd waited years to hear, I'm proud, finally spoken, but the victory felt hollow somehow. Was he proud of me, or just of an action that had been publicly validated by others? Would you be proud if it had gone unnoticed? I asked. If there had been no news story, no viral video, would you have been proud of just a security guard then? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but necessary. I'd like to think so, he said after a long pause. But honestly, I don't know. I've spent a lifetime valuing certain kinds of achievement, certain kinds of recognition. I'm not sure I know how to judge success by other metrics. His honesty, at least, was refreshing. I'd like to understand better, he continued, surprising me again. What you actually do. Your training. Your work. If you're willing to tell me. It was an olive branch, however small. Before I could respond, my phone rang, my brother James's ringtone. Do you mind if I take this? I asked. My father nodded, and I answered the call. Cassie? James sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. Are you free for dinner tonight? I'd like to talk to you about, well, everything, I guess. After arranging to meet James later, I returned to the conversation with my father. For the next hour, I explained my work in terms he could understand. The parallels between security risk assessment and legal case strategy, the professional hierarchy at Griffin Elite, the specialized training I'd undergone. He listened more attentively than he ever had before, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than judgment. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was the beginning of a new understanding. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Your mother would like you to come to dinner on Sunday. Katie will be there too. I think we all have some catching up to do. I'll check my schedule, I promised, not yet ready to fully commit. After he left, I stood at my window, watching his familiar figure move down the street toward the parking garage, still straight-backed and purposeful, the attorney to his core. But something had shifted, however slightly, in our relationship. The truth, so long buried beneath assumptions and pride on both sides, had finally created an opening for something new to grow. That evening, dinner with James proved surprisingly cathartic. My always proper older brother, whose path had so perfectly aligned with our father's expectations, ordered a whiskey neat and admitted things I'd never expected to hear. I've always been a bit jealous of you, Cassie, he confessed, the alcohol perhaps loosening his usual reserve. Your courage to choose your own path. I sometimes wonder if I became an attorney because I wanted to or because it was the path of least resistance. Do you enjoy your work? I asked. He considered this seriously. Most days. But there are moments I wonder about the road not taken. I wanted to study architecture in college, did you know that? I hadn't known. James and I had never been close enough for that kind of confidence. Dad talked me out of it, he continued. Said it was too unstable, too dependent on economic fluctuations. He wasn't wrong, but still. It's not too late, I suggested. You could still explore that interest. James smiled ruefully. 2 kids, a mortgage, partnership track. It gets harder to change direction. That's why what you did was brave. You chose your path early and stuck to it, despite the family pressure. His words made me see my own journey differently. What I had framed as stubborn defiance, he saw as courage. Over the next week, family members reached out one by one. My mother called with technical questions about my security training, her surgeon's mind interested in the physical techniques I'd employed. Katie texted congratulations and a request to hear the real story when she wasn't on hospital rotation. Even extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins who had previously regarded me with benign disinterest, suddenly found my career fascinating. The attention was flattering but also discomfiting. I hadn't chosen security work to impress anyone. I'd chosen it because it aligned with my natural abilities and interests. That the choice had now been externally validated by media attention and family approval felt almost irrelevant to the satisfaction I'd always found in the work itself. The Sunday family dinner arrived with a tension I hadn't felt since college holidays. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, a detail that spoke volumes about her attempt at reconciliation. Katie arrived late from her hospital shift, dark circles under her eyes, but genuinely happy to see me. So, my mother began as we sat around the formal dining table that had hosted so many tense family meals. Tell us more about this Griffin Elite company. The Globe article mentioned they're very selective in their hiring. They are, I confirmed. They recruit primarily from military special forces, FBI, Secret Service. I was an unusual hire because I came from corporate security instead. But they saw something in you, my father added, surprising me with what sounded almost like pride. My threat assessment skills tested in the top percentile, I explained. I have a knack for identifying behavioral anomalies, patterns that don't fit. Like noticing the thieves at the wedding, Katie interjected. Exactly. Most people see what they expect to see. I'm trained to notice what doesn't belong. Is it dangerous? My mother asked, her surgeon's composure slipping to reveal maternal concern. It can be, I admitted. But we're very well trained for risk management. The conversation continued, more open and genuine than any family discussion I could remember. My father asked about my international assignments, Katie was curious about the physical training aspects, and my mother, ever practical, inquired about health insurance and retirement benefits. As dessert was served, my father cleared his throat in the way he always did before making an important pronouncement. "I owe you an apology, Cassandra," he said formally. "I've spent years dismissing your career choice without making any effort to understand it. That was short-sighted of me." Coming from my father, it was tantamount to throwing himself at my feet begging forgiveness. The Thomas Miller I'd grown up with rarely admitted error of any kind. "We both owe you an apology," my mother added. "We should have trusted your judgment more." "We should have trusted all of you more," my father amended, glancing at James and Katie. "Perhaps focus less on what we wanted for you and more on what you wanted for yourselves." The admission hung in the air, significant beyond the immediate context of my security career. It was an acknowledgement of a parenting philosophy that had shaped all our lives, for better or worse. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But I want to be clear about something. I don't need your approval of my career choices. I've been confident in my path for years. What hurt wasn't that you didn't approve, it was that you didn't respect me enough to try to understand." My father nodded slowly, absorbing the distinction. "That's fair. And deserved. So where do we go from here?" Katie asked practically. "Forward, I hope," I replied, with more honesty and less assumption on all sides. As we finished dessert and moved to the living room for coffee, I noticed my father lingering near the family photos displayed on the mantel. He picked up one I hadn't seen before, me in my Griffin Elite uniform at a corporate event, clearly cut from a magazine article. "I found this online yesterday," he explained. "Thought it belonged with the family collection." It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one, my professional identity finally acknowledged as part of the family narrative. The evening ended with tentative plans for more regular family dinners and a genuine, if awkward, hug from my father as I left. The years of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single evening, but the foundation for a new relationship had been laid. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how external validation had finally forced my family to see me clearly. But the real victory wasn't in their newfound respect. It was in the knowledge that I had never needed it to be sure of my own path. 3 months after the wedding incident, Boston's brief autumn had given way to the first chill of winter. The media attention had faded, my viral moment relegated to occasional remember when references from clients who recognized me. Life had largely returned to normal, though normal now included a significantly altered family dynamic. I stood in my parents' kitchen, helping my mother prepare for Sunday dinner. Now a monthly tradition rather than the rare, tension-filled event it had once been. Through the doorway, I could see my father and James discussing something over drinks in the living room, their postures relaxed in a way that would have been unthinkable at family gatherings of the past. "Katie called," my mother said, checking something in the oven. "She's running late again. Hospital emergency." "Of course," I replied, continuing to chop vegetables for the salad. "Some things never change." My mother glanced at me, a small smile playing at her lips. "And some things do. I never thought I'd see you voluntarily helping in the kitchen. I never thought I'd be invited back after choosing the wrong career," I countered, but without the bitterness that would have colored such a remark 3 months ago. My mother's hands stilled on the counter. "We made mistakes, Cassie. Serious ones." "I know, Mom." "So did I." I paused in my chopping. I could have been more open, less defensive. "Pride runs in the family, it seems." She nodded thoughtfully. "Your father has been reading books about Griffin Elite and private security operations. Did you know that?" I hadn't known, and the information touched me unexpectedly. "Really? He ordered them the day after the wedding." "He's trying, Cassie. We both are." The effort wasn't just on their side. I had been making my own attempts to bridge the gap. Sharing more details about my work when appropriate, asking genuine questions about their careers without the defensive edge that had characterized our interactions for years. The doorbell rang, and my mother wiped her hands on a towel. "That must be Katie. Could you get that while I finish here?" I opened the front door to find not just Katie, but also her new boyfriend, Mark, and my teenage niece Lily. James's 14-year-old daughter, who had recently taken to following me around with undisguised admiration. "Aunt Cassie," Lily exclaimed, giving me a hug that nearly knocked me backward. "I got an A on my career presentation about you." "About me?" I echoed, surprised. "It was supposed to be about someone with an unusual career," Lily explained as they entered. "All the other girls did, like fashion designers or vets. But I did high-level security consultant and used you as my example." My teacher didn't believe some of it until I showed her the news video. James appeared from the living room, greeting his daughter with a hug. "She's been talking about this presentation for weeks. Apparently, Aunt Cassie is much cooler than boring old dad the attorney." There was no resentment in his tone, only good-natured acceptance that perhaps the family hierarchy of impressive careers was shifting. Dinner that evening was livelier than any family meal I could remember. Katie's boyfriend Mark, a pediatric nurse with an infectious laugh, brought a new energy to the traditionally formal Miller gatherings. My father, who once would have subtly interrogated any newcomer about their educational pedigree and career prospects, instead listened with genuine interest to Mark's stories about hospital life. "So, Cassie," my father said during a lull in conversation, "tell us about this new assignment you mentioned. Something about a tech conference?" 3 months ago, such a question would have been unthinkable, not because my father wouldn't have asked it, but because I wouldn't have mentioned my assignments at all. "It's a major technology summit in San Francisco next month," I explained. "Several high-profile CEOs with some serious security concerns. I'm leading the advanced team." "That sounds fascinating," my father said, and the remarkable thing was that he seemed to genuinely mean it. "Is it similar to the diplomatic protection work you did in Geneva last year?" The fact that he remembered details about my previous assignments, information I'd cautiously shared over recent family dinners, was itself a sign of how much had changed. "Similar protocols, but different threat assessment matrices," I replied, finding myself naturally shifting into the technical aspects of my work. "Corporate security involves more industrial espionage concerns, fewer political threats." My father nodded thoughtfully. "I imagine there's overlap with some of the intellectual property cases we handle at the firm." "Absolutely. In fact, I consulted on a case last year where a client's trade secrets were compromised through physical security weaknesses rather than cyber breaches." We continued discussing the intersection of legal and security concerns, a conversation that would have been impossible months ago. Not because I couldn't have participated in such a discussion, but because neither of us would have acknowledged the other's expertise as valuable or relevant. After dinner, as James and Katie cleared the table, another change in family dynamics, where tasks were now shared rather than delegated along traditional gender lines, my niece Lily cornered me on the sofa. "Can I ask you something, Aunt Cassie?" she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious for a teenager. "It's about my career day presentation." "Of course." She glanced toward the kitchen, ensuring we had a moment of privacy. "My teacher asked why I chose you as my subject instead of grandpa or dad, since they have more established careers." Her air quotes made her opinion of this assessment clear. I told her it was because you followed your own path even when everyone thought you were wrong. Is that really what happened? The question, asked with a teenager's blunt simplicity, caught me off guard with its insight. "That's a big part of it," I admitted. "I chose a career that felt right to me, even though it wasn't what was expected." "Was it scary? Going against what everyone wanted?" I considered this carefully, wanting to give her an honest answer. "Sometimes. There were moments I doubted myself, wondered if I was making a mistake. It's not easy being the family disappointment." "But you weren't really a disappointment," Lily protested. "You were successful all along. They just couldn't see it." "That's true. But what matters is that I knew my own value, even when others didn't recognize it. That's the hard part, believing in yourself when no one else seems to." Lily nodded solemnly. "I want to study environmental science." Dad keeps talking about pre-law programs, but I don't think that's for me. The confidence she placed in me. Sharing doubts she clearly hadn't voiced to her father felt significant. Your dad might surprise you, I suggested gently. I think our family is learning that success can look different for different people. Our conversation was interrupted as my father entered the room, followed by a colleague he'd apparently invited for after-dinner drinks, an older attorney I vaguely recognized from previous firm events. Richard, I'd like you to meet my daughter, my father said, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Cassandra Miller, Senior Security Consultant at Griffin Elite. She specializes in threat assessment and high-level protection services. The introduction, so different from the dismissive, she's just a security guard that had sparked this entire journey, wasn't delivered with embarrassment or qualification, but with the same pride he'd always used when introducing James or Katie. Yes, Richard replied, extending his hand. Thomas has been telling me about your work. Quite impressive credentials. We've actually been considering Griffin Elite for our firm's international conference security next year. As we discussed the potential security needs of his law firm's event, I caught my father watching us with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not quite pride, not quite regret, but perhaps a complex mixture of both. Later, as guests departed and family members prepared to leave, my father drew me aside in his home office, the sanctum where he had once counseled me against my security career ambitions. I've been meaning to give you something, he said, opening a desk drawer. He withdrew a small box and handed it to me. Inside was a sleek business card holder in polished silver. Engraved on its surface was my name and Griffin Elite Security. I had it made after the wedding, he explained. I thought, well, every professional should have proper business cards. The gift wasn't extravagant, but from my father, a man who placed enormous significance on professional trappings, it represented something profound. Acknowledgement of my professional identity on its own terms. Thank you, I said simply, knowing he would understand the layers of meaning behind those two words. I was wrong, Cassandra, he said quietly. Not just about your career, but about what success really means. I measured it in such narrow terms: degrees, titles, the right kind of profession. I miss seeing that true success is excellence in whatever path you choose. The admission, coming from a man who rarely acknowledged error, felt monumental. We can't change the past, I replied. But I'm glad we're finding a better way forward. He nodded, his usual eloquence seemingly abandoned. After a moment, he added, I'm proud of you, Cassandra. Not because you're suddenly recognized or because your job turns out to be prestigious after all. I'm proud of your conviction. Your certainty in your own path. That's something I should have valued all along. The words I'd waited years to hear, not just I'm proud, but an acknowledgement of my internal compass rather than external validation, filled a space inside me I hadn't realized was still empty. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the journey of the past 3 months. The wedding incident had forced a confrontation that was perhaps long overdue, bringing to light misunderstandings and biases on all sides. The external validation of my career had opened a door, but the real healing had come through the conversations that followed, the difficult, honest exchanges that had allowed my family to see me clearly and, perhaps more importantly, allowed me to see them as flawed, well-intentioned humans rather than just the judges of my life choices. The painful irony wasn't lost on me, that after years of resenting my family's fixation on external validation, it had taken precisely that kind of public recognition to break through our impasse. But perhaps that was simply human nature. Sometimes we need to be shaken out of our established patterns before we can see beyond them. In the end, the lesson wasn't that I needed my family's approval or that they needed to recognize my professional success. It was that genuine understanding requires openness on all sides, a willingness to explain without defensiveness, to listen without preconception, to recognize that our differing paths can all lead to meaningful lives. As I pulled into my apartment building's garage, my phone pinged with a text from Lily. Thanks for talking today. I told Dad about environmental science. He said we'd research programs together this weekend. You were right. I smiled, thinking about how family patterns can change, how rigid expectations can soften, how bridges can be built across even the deepest divides. Sometimes it takes a dramatic moment, a wedding day crisis, a viral video, a public revelation, to catalyze that change. But the real work happens in the quiet moments that follow, in kitchens and living rooms and honest conversations. The security guard and the attorney, the surgeon and the environmental scientist in training. We were all finding our way toward a new understanding of family, of success, of what it means to truly see and support one another. And that, perhaps, was the most important security of all. Have you ever had a moment when your family or friends finally saw you for who you really are? Or have you experienced being misunderstood by those closest to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about family relationships, personal growth, and finding your own path. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to follow their own journey, even when others don't understand it at first. Thank you for joining me for this deeply personal story, and I'll see you in the next video.